everyone, how are you doing? Hope you're keeping well. Thank you for joining me again. Last week we took a look at some white dwarfs, and this week we're going to take a look at another white dwarf. This is another one of the ones that I remember very fondly. It's one of the ones that I've had since I first, this one I think in 1995. This was the start of my white dwarf subscription, having been given one the previous month on holiday by my parents, totted over to the local newsagents when they had such things in little villages like I lived in, and said, can I get this every month? It wasn't an official send off to Games Workshop for subscription. It was a go to the newsagents and say, can I hand you over my £2.50, but going up to £3 from this month? Can I give you my £3 every month for my copy of White Dwarf that was my reading material for the rest of the month? So, without further ado, let us plough on. Okay, here we go. White Dwarf 191, November 1995. You can already see that this White Dwarf has been a lot more flicked through. Creases on the cover, wear on the spine. It's all a bit faded. It's all a bit tattered. But that's just because it's been well loved and well read. And actually, I'm just going to angle that light away. There we go. So we haven't got glare on the pages. That's the problem with darker evenings, having to film under lights. Anyway, now I have not I've not read through this one in preparation because I feel like these ones I've read so much, I know so well that I'm just going to flick through and I'm just going to be confronted by the waves of nostalgia that hit me. This is a big issue. It's not a big issue, it's a white dwarf, but this is a big issue. This is the new fat dwarf. This is when the price went up to £2.99, would you believe, for this big old tome. And it very definitely deserves its own video because of the amount of stuff that's in here. So let's crack on and have a look. So some new stuff being released. Of course, some new stuff being released for Necromunda. Some new stuff being released for Warhammer Quest. And then we get into, here we are, the Kalidas. And not the Kalidas Assassin. We've done the Kalidas Assassin. This is the Eversaw Assassin, the one with the skull head. Here he is, and here's that gorgeous Mike McVey diorama based on the Mark Gibbons artwork. Glorious stuff. I loved that they just let Mike McVey get on and make whatever dioramas he wanted at this point. There was an absolute brilliant use of his talent and so inspiring for budding painters. I think it was a couple of years later, I think it was in 1998 when I went to Games Day Golden Demon, and my entry was an Eversaw Assassin diorama, but I'd sculpted the Eversaw. It was the first GW-ish miniature that I'd sculpted. The first miniature that I'd sculpted, actually, because prior to that I was doing sort of full-sizey things, but I couldn't do it in 28mm, so I sculpted it as like a 72mm high, and I remember he had like a sort of snakeskin bodysuit, and he had actual pins as his the needles on his gauntlet, and very much inspired by this diorama. Here, it didn't place anywhere. It didn't even get into the cabinets, but I entered it, and it started me off on sculpting some stuff. Although I then wouldn't sculpt for a little while afterwards. So, but it was a step. And here is Mike McVey, and you saw in the last issues we were looking at the Horus and the Emperor diorama. The Horus and the Emperor drawing and the story that went with it. Here's the diorama that Mike McVey has made and was making here, based on that. And it was really cool to see that in Warhammer World, but it was even more cool to see in Warhammer World this. And it was weird. I was expecting to look in the cabinet and go, oh, there's all this stuff that I hadn't noticed, and I didn't. I went, oh, it's really like it was in the White Dwarf, because they published this great big spread and then broke it down into all these little scenes and talked about all these little details, and I used to pour over this and absorb all of it. So I feel like I really knew this diorama extremely well. And yes, you were able to see more the sort of forced perspective in the back of the doors here in the archways, and there were a few little bits that I hadn't really come across. There's some more stuff sort of on the reverse side of this archway and further up in this corner that's not shown here. But yeah, that I felt like I really knew it really well from just poring over this article and trying to absorb as much of it as possible. Really cool. One of my favouriteest ever things to appear in White Dwarf. Here's some Q&A on some very specific circumstances to arise in the various games, but as a games developer I can tell you that happens, and you do sometimes have to be very, very specific and put out Q&As. So there you go. Here's how to form a gang in Necromunda with your choices of gang. Look, they released Necromunda and immediately you've got a choice of gang. They didn't just release it with 2 gangs like they did with the new one and expect everyone to fight with 2 gangs. No, you've got a full choice here of lots of different gangs. This is cool. Tactics for using dwarfs in Warhammer. I don't think I read that one particularly. Dwarves have never been a big thing that I've been that excited by. Discussion of these great big vehicles always really reminded me of the vehicles from Thunderbirds. You can imagine them in Jerry Anderson series. Discussion of those and the Tech Priests of Mars. Some more Mike McVey, hooray! More heavy metal. This time discussing... what is he discussing in this one? Oh, this is answering some questions. So yeah, some more Q&A, but answering questions on modelling and painting this time. Great stuff. I feel like starting collecting White Dwarf at this point in its history was really foundational for me actually learning to do any painting. I'd painted stuff previously, but only really sort of picking up, you know, the odd paints here and there, and nobody had sort of shown me how to do any painting. I feel like this series that Mike McVey did in White Dwarf came at exactly the right time for me to learn how to pick up and do some stuff. Here's some discussion of Gareth Hamilton's best painted army at the Warhammer tournament in 1995. It's cool because it's a Chaos Dwarf big hat army, and I like that. It's cool because it's not purple, which is what I associate with the studio big hat Chaos Dwarfs at the time. Maybe falsely, maybe they weren't. I don't know, can't remember now. But I also like this because it's a discussion of an army that looked good. You know, you might have won, but my army looked better. And in an era where everything seems to be very obsessed with rules and tactics and how to get the best out of your army, it's really nice to have an interview with somebody who's just like, yeah, I could pick that up because I really like the way it looks, really like the way the fun things that it does, and how to paint it nicely and make it look good on the table. Here's some discussion of tanks in 40k. Here's a modelling workshop. Ta-da! Another modelling workshop. This also came at a perfect time. I remember going up to the surplus stores and picking up loads of junk and collecting cans and Pringles tubes and making this sort of grotty industrial decay wastelands. And of course they timed this to coincide with Necromunda because that's when you're going to need all of this stuff. Remember Icar 4? Do you remember Icar 4? There you go. I remember Icar 4. Following through the stages of the Tyranid invasion. And Warhammer Quest. A Horror Awakens. How to link campaigns together and some ideas for narrative campaigns that feature aspects of the Catacombs of Terror, the amazing undead scenario pack that had come out at the time. Yeah, some suggestions for turning that into a much larger campaign carrying on the story. And here's a Necromunda battle report. Goliaths versus... You'd think it would be Orlocks, wouldn't you? You'd think that. Oh look, it is Orlocks. Because that's what's in the box. But they're using mostly the metal miniatures here. and another 4-page spread that makes you go, oh yeah, I want to play that game. So made me want to play that game. So much interest, so many levels. I don't really... The green grass at the bottom of the Underhive is an interesting choice. Lots of people have commented on it, but it certainly gives it a particular aesthetic. You can't, you can't argue with the aesthetic. I love these maps. Love these drawn maps. And even just that look. How cool does that look? 3-dimensional gaming, not just tabletop gaming. These very cool, atmospheric, nicely lit shots. I love the kind of red sky in the background, sets everything off. Really cool. Love it. Love it. And then, of course, being a bigger White Dwarf, you've got more space at the back. Not loads of space. For some adverts. There we go. Full complement, apart from the Culexus assassin, which came in later. But full complement of Imperial assassins from this time. Catachan Jungle Fighters. There are those Jerry Anderson tanks. Some Dwarfs, because we've been discussing Dwarf tactics. Some Chaos Dwarfs, because there was a really nicely painted Chaos Dwarf army in there, and you might want to buy these and paint your own. Some Necromunda, of course, because these were in the fight, so you might want to buy these for your gang. And then on the back, this very cool image. Let me zoom in on that. There we go. Chaos versus Orcs and Goblins. Bright and cheerful image. Excellent, good stuff. Lovely. Right, join me next week for more more nostalgia, more hobby stuff. See you then.